Hey guys, welcome to the shop. I want to do a quick video to get everybody up to speed on what we're doing with the 383 stroker, the engine that we're building for the old Chevy pickup truck. I ran into some issues that I want to share with you. Really, it's a problem, I guess, or a mistake on my, let's call it an oversight. It sounds less serious than the word mistake. An oversight on my part, just with the components and stuff that I'm using, and maybe you guys will find this interesting, and I know there's a few guys out there who are building these and potentially could save them from making, you know, the same oversight. So let me share it with you. We'll do a couple other things as well. So thanks for watching. So this is the block of the engine that's going to be going in the old pickup truck, and I was hoping to have this thing assembled, at least in a short block form, but I ran into some issues that we'll discuss here in just a second. Now, in case you're just tuning in for the first time, this is a 350 small block, bored 30 over on each cylinder, and it's going to get a 400 crankshaft in it, which will basically increase the length of the stroke, how far the piston travels, by a 1/4 inch. So 30 over on the bore, 1/4 inch longer travel, gives us a displacement of 383. And most people have heard the term a 383 stroker, and that's basically what this is. And if you're rebuilding a 350, if you have one that needs bored out, and it needs maybe a crankshaft journals turned, and turn it into a stroker motor, you're almost there, right? Little bit of extra expense to make a stroker motor, but for those little bitty changes, 30 over on the bores, 1/4 inch extra travel on the stroke, you get a ton of extra torque and horsepower. So great motor, especially for a truck. So let me show you the problem that I've run into, and it's basically an oversight on my part, just inexperience, not a professional engine builder by any stretch. Let me share with you the problem that I've run into that I can't overlook. So this is going to be a bit long-winded, so just bear with me here. Now, I was just getting ready to start taking these parts and putting them into the block of this engine, getting us a nice assembled short block here. Now, what I ran into is a quality issue with some of the components that I have here. I want a bottom end that at least meets my minimum requirements of quality and should hold together, because it's really important that the bottom end of this engine be able to handle everything that I plan to do with this engine, both currently and in the future, as far as, you know, quality heads and exhaust systems and all that stuff. It needs to be able to handle the horsepower that I intend to make with it. Okay, so we've got that far. Well, I was under the assumption that this was a complete SCAT rotating assembly. SCAT is just a name brand maker of components, right? They make some budget stuff, they make some real high-end stuff, but they do have a pretty decent name as far as reliability and stuff. From the people that I know and talk to, you know, if you're going to build an engine on a budget, SCAT is not a bad name to go with. We have a SCAT cast iron crank, perfectly fine with that. That'll handle 700 horsepower if I chose to go that way, 7,000 RPM, says the SCAT representative. I don't plan to go that far, so that crank should be perfectly fine. And I have some questions that I'm talking to the SCAT gentleman about before I start putting these parts in, and I get to the connecting rods. I want to make sure that they can also handle what I plan to do both now and in the future. Well, I start talking to him about this rod, and I'm explaining it in detail, and he tells me that this is not one of their rods. So I was under the assumption that this was a complete, both crank and rod, SCAT assembly, and I come to find out that this is just a cheap knockoff of a SCAT rod. It looks identical in every single way, and in my defense, this is an engine, when I bought it from a buddy of mine who, you know, bought it as a kit, who's not a professional engine builder. I looked at it assembled, you know, in a dark building, and looking at this rod, it looks exactly like what I thought it was, but come to find out it's not. And as far as components that I'm willing to compromise on quality, I'm not going to put an unknown rod in this engine. It could be made by Speedway, but you know, still not that great of a quality connecting rod. Plus the hardware that I thought was genuine ARP hardware, the fasteners in these connecting rods are not. They're just cheap knockoffs as well. So both of those things combined, just not a risk I'm willing to take on this engine. So a little closer look at the connecting rod there. Not a bad looking piece, 5.7 inches, bronze bushed floating pin end. It looks exactly like the rod that I thought it was, but come to find out it is just a cheaper version of that. I don't know exactly who made this, but you know, I think I got an idea. And they don't have the best track record of making, you know, the most reliable components. And it's such a vital thing. If this breaks, either the rod or the hardware, a lot of times it just devastates the entire engine and you lose everything. So it's not a good place to make huge compromises. Another big red flag with these connecting rods is that what I thought was genuine ARP hardware, ARP is a really trusted manufacturer of fasteners, these are not. They're just a cheap knockoff that look identical, but they're just who knows who made them, and who knows if they are the alloy that's stamped on the head and if they've been even heat treated properly. It's just not a place where, you know, you should skimp, at least not entirely. So even though this is a very budget-minded build, I'm just not willing to take the risk that's involved with putting an unknown connecting rod in this thing, because the cost of failure is just total loss in a lot of cases. And every time that if I used those every time I drove this thing, I'd be concerned. Every time I put a load behind it, anytime I just wanted to step in it a bit, you know, is those rods going to hold together and not scatter all my work all over the road or driveway? Now, I'm not going to go with some race, you know, super high-end rod, because it's just not needed for this thing. It's not going to be blown. It's not going to be nitrous, right? No supercharger. I'm going to go with a rod that is rated for the horsepower that I'm going to be using or making in this thing, plus one that has a track record of holding together, and one that doesn't require clearancing for my camshaft. You know, this is just another issue that, if you get into the details, that you have to look at when it comes to a stroker motor, is does it clear everything? So even if it holds me up, slows me down, I think it's the best decision to make to just stop and regroup, right? Try to make as best decision as I can, and I think not using those rods is a good decision. So because I'm delayed on building this engine, that gives me time to look at some other stuff that I need to, and one of those items is the clutch. Because I need to put a flywheel in this 383, I can't reuse my old one. You know, I need to make sure that this clutch and pressure plate are in good enough shape to put on a new flywheel, because I have to do that because this one won't work. So I put this clutch, pressure plate, flywheel, throwout bearing, pilot bushing, all in the truck new probably, I don't know, several years ago, and it's probably got about 15,000 miles on it. So I'm looking at to make sure that, you know, I'm not going to just eat up a new flywheel simply because I want to not put in a clutch and I want to reuse it. But this one looks like it's in plenty good enough shape to reuse. No score lines at all. Material's good and thick on it. No broken springs or rivets or anything like that. So really happy with the actual friction disc. The pressure plate, no hot spots to speak of. Got a couple little specks there, but nice and smooth. No broken fingers. Sometimes these will get broke and cause your clutch not to fully disengage, cause you all kinds of problems. They'll break on these springs, or even the ears where it connects to the actual flywheel itself. These look pretty good. Is that broken? No. Whew! I was kind of freaking out there. It's just the way it's made. Anyway, looks good, so I'll be able to reuse this, thankfully. And that'll save me a little bit of money. Even found the original tool that come with this kit when I bought it. I actually stuck that in a drawer because I do save these, and I'm glad that I did because it come in handy. So got a little public service announcement in regards to the issue that I ran into with this rotating assembly crank and connecting rods, or just the connecting rods really. So like I said, I bought this kit from a buddy of mine who bought it from an online website, and I want to be very careful in the way that I say this because I don't want to paint any one website in a bad light, not being the one who purchased this kit from that site originally. I didn't read all the fine print, but come to find out, there's a lot of people who have ran into the exact same situation that I ran into with this one company, and their customer reviews are horrible. I've tried to call them about 4 or 5 times, and all I get is an answering machine. I leave a message. These are not irate phone calls. They're just general questions. Still, no return phone call 2 weeks later. So kind of upset with this company, to be honest. So be careful where you buy your parts. Now, as soon as I found out that I had to put a set of connecting rods in this thing, I knew that that would require me to get this thing rebalanced as well because it changes things. So I call the first machine shop that does balance jobs in town. First one that I find. Talking to the guy, I said, well, I bought what I thought was a scat rotating assembly. Come to find out it has a cheap set of connecting rods in it that I'm not willing to take a chance on. So I have to put a set of connecting rods and get this rebalanced. What's that going to cost me? Well, he stops me and he says, you know what, that's funny. I ran into that exact same situation with a customer not very long at all ago, where a customer brought me what he said was a scat rotating assembly, and come to find out it just had a cheap set of knockoff rods in it, and it was from such and such company. Well, just so happens that's exactly the same company where my kit come from. And what's the odds of the first place that I call, having ran into the exact same thing that I ran into? And really it's just inexperience on my part and probably the customer's part, not being a professional in the field. It's easy to think you're getting a good deal on a set of components, the ones that are pictured on the website, and maybe you don't read the fine print. Like I said, I'm not going to name this website. Just do your own research and look into companies before you buy anything. It's real easy to make a mistake like what's happened here. So buy your components from a really known big website. If you're going to do that you can just call, talk to, send that stuff back. There's no $500 restocking fee, no silly things like that some of these places have. And it's almost like some of these websites are written to, some of these ads are written to take advantage of the people who may not, be 100% in the know. So just be careful. Talk to your local machinist who does this stuff every day. He'll put you on the right track for sure. So that's it. Just watch where you buy this stuff from, because it's easy to be maybe taken advantage of if you're not 100% on top of things, right? So while I got you here, let's talk about the exhaust, at least the headers that we're going to be using on this truck. Now this is a set of Schofield 1 3/4 tube, full length, 3-inch on the outlet. Just decent quality set of headers, nothing fancy, right? They're not ceramic coated or anything, which would have been nice, but they're quite a bit more expensive. But they do last longer. That's the thing about ceramic coated headers, is that you just buy them once in most cases. Because exhaust gases are extremely corrosive, you don't just rust on the outside, right? The exhaust will rust on the inside as well, and that's where a good quality set of ceramic headers, are worth the extra money if you have it to spend on them, right? So in order to solve one of the problems that a non-coated header presents is the heat that they radiate out. Underhood temperature is going to be crazy if I didn't wrap these things. So we're going to be using a cheap, about as cheap as you're going to find on Amazon, exhaust wrap. I've already done one, as you can see, and we're going to wrap these. It's a pain, it really is, but I think it's necessary to keep the underhood temperatures down and to keep us from baking our plug wires. So if a person's got the money to spend and they're going to keep the vehicle that they're putting the set of headers on, just go ceramic. They last forever if they're coated on the inside and outside. They hold in the heat so much better, and they always look good. Where these, they're going to start rusting immediately and require the wrapping, or else they're just going to cook everything under the hood. So wrapping a set of headers like this is a pain in the butt, that's for sure, especially when the tubes are real close. You don't want to waste this stuff because you don't have an infinite supply of it. So I like to do like you see here, just pull a lot off the roll, and it'll give me a good idea on how much I need, and then I just loosely wrap until I run out, and I'll pull in a little more if I need it and go from there. That way I don't end up just cutting random length pieces hoping that I get them to fit. I also like to trim these ends because this stuff just loves to unravel. And then I take a little bit of super glue and just dab on the end here in a few spots. And give that just a second to cure, and that'll keep it from unwinding while you're trying to wrap this around. So I've got this far, and I can already tell you that it's a mouse. What the heck? So I ran into a problem where I didn't have enough. So I'm just going to unwrap it some. It just takes some time to get this stuff right. And I'm going to pull some more off of the spool, just like that. I think that should do it. And just start all over. Or at least almost all over, basically. So there's my first wrap. It's just held on the ends by stainless zip ties, basically. Just make sure to wrap it good and tight. I got one spot there that I don't like, a little exposed, but it ain't gonna make any difference. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Just needs to cover the vast majority of surface on these headers. So now I'm gonna do this tube here, and then these will get wrapped, or at least some of them will get wrapped together like I did the other one. I think that turned out pretty good. About as good as I could do, actually, because they are so tight that you may be able to wrap one tube, but you can't necessarily wrap the tube next to it, especially these here. I think that'll work. That'll get wrapped. Yeah. That should work. I hope. And that's it. Man, what a pain. But I think that's it. It's going to sound awesome. So there we go. I can finally check header wrapping off of my list. It's not a fun thing to do, I can tell you that, and it'd be even less fun if they were on the vehicle. So maybe even impossible in some sections, but definitely if you got to set off and they're not ceramic coated, super nice headers, best to wrap them. That way the majority of the heat that gets dumped out of the engine gets at least held into the exhaust system till it gets out and under the vehicle. Otherwise it's just going to, you know, waft off those headers under the hood, bake all the rubber components, and I've seen it even ruin the paint on guys' hoods before. So best to wrap them. Now these headers being 1 3/4 inch should be able to handle anything that stroker motor, you know, is willing or is able to produce power-wise and not restrict it. I think the biggest that I've seen for a small block is 1 7/8 inches, but I may be wrong. I think the common normal size is 1.5 inches. So pretty hefty header there with a 3-inch outlet, which I'm hoping to run 3-inch, like dual 3-inch pipes right out of this thing, which should be awesome. And I'm planning to do it in stainless on the Super Cheap, if that's possible. And I believe that it is, as long as you stay away from the pipes that are labeled exhaust. Usually, from what I've seen, you know, if you buy a dedicated exhaust pipe, it's expensive, but you can buy stainless pipe for, you know, cheaper. So that's what I'm going to try to do. If you can weld and do it on your own, maybe you'll save some money that way. And that's what I'm hoping to do to this thing. May run it out in front of the rear tires for the cool factor. There's some drawbacks to that, like getting your wheels sooty, or may run straight out the back. I don't know. We'll see. But it's going to sound awesome, and this is going to look awesome bolted to that engine. So pretty exciting, even though it is just a set of pipes right now. So let's wrap up this update on the reason why I'm delayed for the stroker build. I was really hoping last week, where I didn't even post, but I was hoping to have a video of us assembling this thing and having a complete rotating assembly, but it just didn't happen. I ran up on that issue with the connecting rods. You know, I started calling around to manufacturers and machine shops trying to figure out the best path forward, and it just ran out of time. It just couldn't happen. And I want to make sure that I at least make the most informed decision moving forward as possible. Not being an expert, right? Got a lot of questions, and sometimes it takes time to get answers, and that's what I've been dealing with. So apologize to the guys that missed that Saturday morning video. It wasn't for lack of trying. So moving forward, got to put a set of connecting rods in this. Since I'm doing that, I have to get it rebalanced, because that changes, it just changes things. The rods are going to be of different weight, and I'll have to take this thing to a machine shop and have it balanced. It's a super bummer to find this out, trust me. But I would be even more bummed if I just disregarded what I found, put this thing together, and then scattered that motor all over the driveway because I wasn't willing to, you know, just step back, don't get in such a hurry, and try to do things at least as good as I can. There's always restrictions on folks, either finance or time or whatever ability, right? So that's the story. So thanks for watching. Hopefully we'll be back on track here soon. Viewers, patrons, subscribers, anybody who's helped me out whatsoever, it is much appreciated. You can believe that. And that's it. So I'll see you next time.